A few years ago now, as part of really its first major collaboration with one of the light novels, the mobile game Bleach Brave Souls introduced the concept of Beyond Resurrección, brand new transformations for the Espada that took them to the next level. The idea behind these alternate universe forms was simple. What if each of the Espada had fused with the Hōgyoku and transcended in a similar fashion to the way their master Aizen would in the canon story? Well, the result is some pretty cool looking new designs for the Espada, each of them now incorporating the Hōgyoku as a central part of their look, again in the same way Aizen would in Bleach itself, showing the mysterious orb's influence over their newfound power. Honestly, I've always loved these so-called Beyond Resurrección forms. They were the first real sign that Bleach Brave Souls was going to do something really cool with the franchise, and take it to places that we hadn't expected. They'd later follow this with a similar theme in Beyond Bankai too. So, what's the deal with these forms? What do they symbolise, and which is the best? In today's video, I'm going to take a long overdue look at these Espada forms, which are unique to Bleach Brave Souls. This is a topic I've wanted to look at for some time, to be honest, but simply never got round to it. Well, now is the chance, better late than never. In this Bleach alternate universe, the Espada have acquired a new power and become even more terrifying, transcending beyond the boundary of what was originally thought possible to achieve with their hollow powers alone. So, let's take a look. Before we get started on the video, guys, just a couple of housekeeping points. If you enjoyed this video when you're done with it, make sure to hit subscribe and help push us to 300,000 subs, our next major milestone. I really would appreciate the support. And a huge thank you to each and every one of you that went and subscribed over on my second channel, Mr. Tomo Talks Games, as we did manage to hit our 10,000 subscriber goal before the end of January. So I am really appreciative of that. Thank you so very much. I really do want to get that channel off the ground and running. So if you are into games or you just want to support me and what I do here on YouTube, consider checking that channel out and subscribing if you haven't done already. And finally, if you noticed, I am using a brand new audio setup. I'm trying to improve the audio quality for you guys for the channels and the videos, so it might be a little bit of a bumpy ride. There might be some teething problems to begin with. I apologise if it doesn't sound perfect right away. I'm not particularly technical, I'm not going to lie. Most of this stuff is kind of going right over my head, but I'm trying my best, and hopefully we'll iron out any issues in the weeks to come. So, almost every single member of the Espada received one of these new forms in the game, including Nell, which was a nice touch. Strangely, however, Lupi is the only member of the Espada to not receive a Beyond Resurrección form, which is a little weird. And if there was one character who isn't an Espada that I would have loved to have seen get one of these forms, it would have been Rudborn, because his Resurrección is already really awesome, and I think they could have done something really cool and creepy with a Beyond Resurrección Arbol, but there you go. Anyway, as you can see from the artwork, when an Espada successfully fuses with the Hōgyoku, they transform, attaining a new level of power that feels and looks like a real step up from their previous Resurrección. In other words, taking that original hollow power that was sealed away into a sword and forcing it to go beyond its limits. While this is just speculation on my part, I think it's clear from the individual designs that this is exactly what's happening here. In most of these designs, the Hōgyoku looks almost forcibly embedded into the Ranka, and huge cracks and fissures have appeared in their bodies as though they struggle to contain it, spreading out from where the Hōgyoku is now unleashing pure power. Many of the designs incorporate not just the Hōgyoku itself, but a powerful, flaming, colourful Reiatsu that seems to ebb and flow from the Hōgyoku through the Espada's bodies, which now acts as a central point within the Espada. While they retain the overall idea and theme of their Resurrección, and in fact in many cases have transgressed even further into their original animalistic hollow appearances, such as Nnoitora's mantis look for example, many of their overtly hollow attributes have been removed or altered by the Hōgyoku's presence and power. As you can see from most if not all of their designs, the Hōgyoku is now suspended within the Espada's individual hollow hole as though superseding exceeding their original power, and their mask remnants have been transformed into flaming Reiatsu, again likely produced by the Hōgyoku itself, as though overwriting their previous makeup. And of course, there is a clear inspiration here. Aizen's Hōgyoku evolutions, specifically his final monster evolution, wherein the Hōgyoku had taken such control and influence over his body that it was now just floating in the middle of Aizen's newly formed hollow hole. Anyway, let's go down the list and start things off with the big man himself, Yammy. According to the game, when Yammy awakens a power greater than Resurrección, he unlocks the awesome power of his rage and transforms. Even Yammy's description sounds lame. The Yammy we see here, in my opinion at least, looks most like the second form he takes on during his battle with Byakuya and Kenpachi in Hueco Mundo. There are some similarities. For starters, he's once again bipedal and has enormous horns jutting out of his back and shoulders. In this form, his hollow mask remnants have been replaced with flaming black and red Reiatsu, which coils around a single horn protruding from his forehead, that same glowing power coursing through his body, emanating from his hollow hole, which is now cracked and broken. Those cracks have spread across the surface of Yammy's entire body, shattering the palms of his hands and giving them the appearance of a river of lava, spilling forth from fractured rock. The Reiatsu can even be found at the tips of his horns and running along his massive armoured tail. Despite this form seemingly being an evolution of that second Resurrección of Yammy's, he has lost basically everything that originally made him look like an ape in that form, and now looks perhaps more like a ferocious kaiju here than ever before, one erupting with the fiery power of the earth itself. Perhaps most interestingly about this form, however, is the Hōgyoku. It's not actually found within Yammy's body. We're starting things off in a weird way. Instead, it floats ominously behind him, nestled between the gigantic spikes on his back. And unless it's just the perspective messing with me, it now appears to be colossal in size as well, perhaps to account for Yammy's insurmountable Reiatsu. In this form, Yammy's ultimate ability is called El Gigante de la Ira, which means the Giant of Anger, and overcome with incandescent rage, as the game notes, Yammy fractures the entire earth around him, unleashing a hellish power from within. Up next we have Starrk's form, and design-wise this may very well be my absolute favourite of the lot, and it's actually one of the most interesting as well. When Starrk fuses with the Hōgyoku, fascinatingly, according to the game's lore, two souls combine and become one, presumably. Now, this is obviously referencing Starrk and Lilinet, but while you could argue this is what happens when they use their Resurrección anyway, Los Lobos, my theory is that this version of Starrk goes a step beyond that. When using Los Lobos, although Starrk and Lilinet do indeed become one being again, there's still a degree of separation in their identities. They both have their own consciousness. Starrk is the main form, yes, but Lilinet is very clearly still her own being as the pistols themselves. Here, I'm kind of assuming that Lilinet's presence is almost entirely gone, overwritten perhaps, mixed completely into Starrk himself, as seen by the blending of the colours of their Reiatsu. Starrk's hair is now a peculiar shade of blue, but my assumption is that this is perhaps close to what you get when you combine Starrk's dark brown hair with Lilinet's almost pale green shade. Secondly, Starrk's bandoliers are now made of pure energy, but that energy changes seamlessly from blue to green and then back again as they loop round. At the same time, the bullets from Starrk's guns are now a mix of blue and green as well. The combined colour of their Reiatsu, at least as how presented in the anime. The absolute craziest aspect of this design, though, of course, is the Hōgyoku's influence. Or is it perhaps Starrk and Lilinet's own power over the Hōgyoku itself? As you can see, Starrk isn't fused with one, but two Hōgyoku, each one inhabiting a separate hollow hole. The upper hollow hole is Starrk's usual one and is coloured blue, while the lower hollow hole is brand new and coloured green, and the two of them are linked by cracks and fissures of power. I wonder, If when Starrk and Lilinet fused with the Hōgyoku, it was forced to duplicate itself in order to contain the raw power of their combined souls, essentially creating a Hōgyoku for each soul inhabiting the body. Alongside this, Starrk now also wears a pair of gun boots, and the hollow mask remnant that was Lilinet's eye patch is now gone, replaced by a trail of flaming blue and black Reiatsu. Interestingly though, the marking that was on Lilinet's helmet originally, then Starrk's eye patch in Resurrección, has remained, implying it wasn't a part of her hollow mask naturally. Starrk's special ability Revolver de los Lobos, or Revolver of the Wolves, conjures two gigantic guns made of that flaming power, each one bearing the ferocious face of a wolf, before firing enormous beams of energy. Now, Baraggan's form is extremely cool, and its description is frankly bananas, but that just makes it all the more awesome. The in-game lore reads that this form was the result of Baraggan escaping the abyss of death and returning to his throne. Now, I can't really remember, I'm not sure how literally we were supposed to take this. Is it meant to show what happens if Baraggan somehow fused with the Hōgyoku after dying? Or could it be that this is what becomes of Baraggan if he's already fused with the Hōgyoku and then it resurrects him in the same way it resurrected Aizen numerous times? Either way, he looks incredible. There's definitely some evidence here to suggest that this is Baraggan after he was killed by Hachi. For example, much of his skeleton is completely missing now. Instead, the Hōgyoku simply floats within a distorted and broken ribcage, the vast majority of Baraggan's new form now seemingly contained within this void-like fur cloak he's wearing. In fact, if I remember rightly, and I try and bring myself back to when this collaboration actually happened, the game does mention that Tokinada resurrected Baraggan, I think, so yeah, this all does make sense. This is essentially what the Hōgyoku could salvage from, like it says, the abyss of death, I guess. And again, furthermore to that, another interesting point is that Baraggan's right arm is now made entirely of gold, and this is the same arm he loses in his battle with Soifon and Hachi after she successfully hits him with her bankai. The eye-shaped medallion that used to rest on Baraggan's chest has now become a fearsome spiked crown, and perhaps creepiest of all are the new bone tusks that jut out from either side of Baraggan's head, each one tipped with bright pink and crimson flames. And so yeah, it really is the case then that Baraggan's body has been rebuilt as best it can after being destroyed by his own power at the end of his duel with Hachi, and the Hōgyoku is now holding this revenant, this lich, together in his ghost-like state. Either way, he looks awesome. He's giving me Gravelord Nito vibes, to be honest. Baraggan's special move in this form is Destino Arrogante, which here means arrogant destiny, and depicts Baraggan rising from his throne atop a flight of stairs as he spreads his power to age all things to nothingness around him. And we can even see the moon crumbling to dust in the sky above. In Harribel's Beyond Resurrección form, she loses even more of her clothes. Why am I not surprised? But okay, there is a bit more to it than that. But indeed, her hollow mask fragments are entirely gone now, replaced by strips of flaming gold Reiatsu that also run all the way down her new enormous shark's fin tail and form the entire basis for her new weapon. So let's start there. Harribel's Shark-Tooth Greatsword has been replaced almost completely by the Hōgyoku's golden power, generating a weapon similar in shape, but now with the flickering consistency of fire. It is lined, however, with 3 shark's teeth. Harribel's hair has now become a silvery grey, and in a similar vein, portions of her body, including one of her legs, are now covered in a strange armour. In my opinion, some of the armour, such as the shoulder pad and the crown, almost look as though they're meant to resemble coral, albeit with the colours of a shark, black, grey and white, running throughout. The massive tail... Are they called tails on sharks, or are they just fins? I guess in this particular instance it would be a tail, though. But anyway, it does give her a streamlined look, and the actual fin itself, being made entirely of the gold and white Reiatsu, is a cool design choice. In a nice piece of continuity, I believe it was Databook 3 Unmasked, that revealed that Harribel's hollow hole was actually in her lower abdomen near where her womb would be, and here in this form we can see that that is where the Hōgyoku is as well, confirming that that is the placement of her hollow hole. Her ultimate ability Dientes de Tiburon, or Shark Teeth, conjures a wave of golden light from her sword, while a plethora of miniature shark teeth swoop around her, helping to charge up and empower the blast in a manner that's now kind of weirdly similar to how Uryu's Volstendish works. Harribel then unleashes the blast like a whip from the blade itself, and it's said that this form comes about as part of Harribel's desire to search for peace, albeit with a sharpened blade in her hand. Up next we have Nelliel's form. Like I said, she received one even though Lupi didn't. Now, Nell's Beyond Resurrección form once again takes clear inspiration from her Resurrección Gamuza, empowering her already centaur-like appearance. According to the in-game lore, this is Nell after she has shown her true strength in order to fight for those that she wishes to protect. Maybe it's just me, but it doesn't look like the Hōgyoku has as much influence over Nell's physical body as it does the other Espada. In her instance, the flaming pink Reiatsu is mostly limited to her weapon, the enormous javelin in her hand, which constantly churns and swirls, that torrential power being contained to the weapon itself. The only other instance of fiery Reiatsu we can see can be found on the tip of her tail, while the rest of her body is mostly unafflicted. The Hōgyoku itself then can be found at the base of Nell's javelin, and there's also no hollow hole at all to speak of on her form whatsoever, meaning again that this is the only form where the Hōgyoku isn't at least in some way attached to her body. Even in Yammy's case, where the Hōgyoku floats behind him, it does so in conjunction with where his hollow hole can be found. But yeah, for the most part, I think this form is fairly unremarkable. In fact, I believe Nell, along with Grimmjow, was the first to get one of these forms outside of Ulquiorra, who's technically arrived separately to kickstart things off, and both her form and Grimmjow's are some of the least interesting to me, so they kind of improved as they went along. I do like the giant curved horns now protruding directly from her head, but again, that's interesting. Her hollow mask remnants have not turned into pure energy like with the other Espada. Another interesting tidbit is that during her special move Lanza de Luz Gamuza, meaning Lance of Light Chamois, Nell mentions lamentation. This was due to Can't For Your Own World revealing her aspect of death to be lamentation, though it has since been contradicted by Kubo himself, who later revealed it to be sacrifice, the same as Harribel. Ulquiorra's Beyond Resurrección form, which depicts him as an archetypal fallen angel, complete with 4 giant pitch-black feathered wings, is absolutely one of the best in my opinion, and a top-tier Brave Souls original design. While not technically part of the Beyond Resurrección tie-in, created instead specifically for the game's 3rd anniversary, I think, which sounds crazy now, Ulquiorra acts as a precursor for the rest of the forms to come. In this form, which is a clear evolution of Ulquiorra's Segunda Etapa, as opposed to his actual first Resurrección, no surprises there, Ulquiorra's hair has turned a moonlit white, while his horns have now become wisps of fiery black and green Reiatsu. A sinister black ooze still drips from his hollow hole in the centre of his chest, but now the hollow hole is bathed in a sickly, ghostly green glow, which also leaks an energy of its own, as though the Hōgyoku is sitting on the surface of a shimmering pool of light. From his hollow hole, cracks run across his chest and down his torso. Meanwhile, the very tip of Ulquiorra's tail, which used to be covered in black fur, is now also consumed by fire. The in-game lore highlights this form's power, noting Ulquiorra can now render everything he sees to nothingness. Ulquiorra's special move Tormenta de Murcielago, meaning Bat Storm, emphasises the religious parallels, as a heavenly light descends upon him before he spreads his wings and conjures a crushing typhoon of green and black darkness to consume the world. To date, Ulquiorra is the only Espada to have received a second, updated version of his Beyond Resurrección unit, complete with new artwork and a new special move, La Nada Eterna, the Eternal Nothingness, wherein he unleashes a massive Cerro from the confines of his black wings. Next we have Nnoitora's Beyond Resurrección form, which, according to the in-game lore, hones his entire body into a blade-like weapon. This is another great design in my opinion. It captures the essence of Nnoitora's mantis-like resurrection, which sees the Espada generating and wielding a number of vicious scythes from within his own body, and takes it up a notch, restoring some of that monstrous animalism that was missing from Santa Teresa initially. In this form, much of Nnoitora's skin has now turned a sleek jet black, and in some cases it looks as though he's been outfitted with an armoured exoskeleton. Once again, the Hōgyoku has been implanted in his hollow hole, which looks particularly cool on Nnoitora, as it means it's effectively become one of his eyes. Much like Ulquiorra before him, where Nnoitora once had a pair of enormous curved horns in his Resurrección, they've now been replaced by a crescent moon of black and yellow fire, that same yellow power pulsating throughout Nnoitora's slender frame. Perhaps the coolest aspect of this form is the way the design incorporates Nnoitora's 6 arms from his initial release. Here, Nnoitora is back to having only 2 arms again, though they are completely covered by that black armour and bear a pair of cruel-looking scythes on the forearms. However, floating behind the Espada now are 4 additional scythes, each of them made of that shimmering flaming Reiatsu. Much like a lot of the other Espada, for example Starrk and Ulquiorra, Nnoitora's remaining eye is now a single colour, a deep purple in this instance, and his special move, Santa Teresa Guadaña, meaning praying mantis scythe, conjures a gigantic yellow crescent moon behind him, much in the same way as when he releases his Zanpakuto initially. After this, the 4 scythes upon his back elongate, transforming into insectoid-like legs, with which Nnoitora then impales and lifts his victim. By unlocking a power greater than Resurrección and following his destructive instincts to the bitter end, Grimmjow attains this new form. And I've got to be honest, I'm not a huge fan. It's not bad per se. In fact, I don't think any of these forms look bad, even if some of them do err on the side of being over-designed, but it's a tale of 2 halves this time. The top half of Grimmjow's new form is actually pretty cool. I like the untamed, wild hair that's both reminiscent and an evolution of his blue mane while in Pantera, and it's cool to see that what remained of his hollow mask, the small crown adorning his forehead, has, as expected, become a streak of fierce blue fire. The Hōgyoku sits within his hollow hole, but in a cool detail. The scar he received from Ichigo is now aflame up his body with a crystalline ice blue light. I also quite like the split dual tails he has. They look like a serrated whip, almost, the fiery Reiatsu visible between each segment. It's nicely detailed. But I don't know, there's something inherently goofy about this form, and I think it might be the animal legs. The majority of his bottom half, essentially. It just doesn't quite work for me. I'm not sure if it's the colour scheme or the spotty pattern or what, but it's just not my favourite. Grimmjow's special move, Pantera Destrucción, fairly clearly meaning Panther Destruction, is actually pretty cool though, as he blitzes around his opponent, carving up the sky and creating a dome of Desgaron essentially, as the energy beams, shaped like claw swipes, close in with a massive blast. Again, Ulquiorra aside, there's something about the first couple of attempts at a Beyond Resurrección that don't work as well for me as some of the others, so maybe it was about them finding their stride, or it's simply a matter of preference. Okay, Zommari. I'm going to be upfront and say that I think this form actually looks kind of awesome, and is maybe the only form on this list that I think genuinely looks better than the Espada's actual Resurrección. Now, I know that's not a particularly high bar to clear. Zommari has easily the lamest looking Resurrección of all of the Espada, but this does look fantastic. It's got a clear and concise theme, excellent bold colours, and just a really creepy vibe overall. If Zommari had transformed into this during his battle with Byakuya, it might have actually been intimidating. Again, it does err on the side of being over-designed, but I mean, I don't know, the eyes on his body could open gradually over the course of the battle, for example. It doesn't have to look like this all the time. Anyway, here Zommari's body is completely exposed this time, whereas in his Resurrección much of it is hidden beneath his outfit and his hollow mask remnants. Here, what's left of his hollow mask remnant, his spiked necklace, has transformed into a deep purple ring of flames, which again looks really cool. In this form we can actually see Zommari's hollow hole too. It's on the right side of his chest, and of course the Hōgyoku can be found within, producing a hypnotic purple glow. Zommari now has 4 arms, and the emblem of his amour is plastered on his head in a really cool touch. It's almost as though his body is now being moved like a puppet by his own ability, as we know that when he lands his amour on a target's head, he then gains control of their entire body. In this form, we can actually see Zommari's lower half as he sits in a meditative pose within the open petals of what looks to be a lotus flower or something, while a magical purple symbol flares into life behind him, the thorny tendrils of Zommari's love oozing from either side. Finally, completing the look, several black eyes float in the air, complete with hollow teeth, perhaps the remnants of Zommari's cowl in his original Resurrección. On the whole then, this is a really great looking design in my opinion, and a big improvement over the original. Supposedly born out of learning to control an even deeper form of love, this form does a cool thing in its special move, Brujeria Gubernate, or Witchcraft Ruler, where Zommari's chant spreads flowers across the battlefield, allowing him to project his love, his control. Well, Szayelaporro's Beyond Resurrección form is definitely a little suspect, and maybe even a bit explicit, but what would you expect from a character whose Zanpakuto name had to be censored in the English version of the manga? Yes, Szayelaporro's Zanpakuto, for those of you who only know it as La Lujuriosa, though I imagine that's not many of you, is actually called Fornicarus, and well, this new form is pretty on brand. In this form, Szayelaporro's facial markings indicate that this is an evolution of his Resurrección itself, while his hollow mask fragments, the headdress seen upon his transformation, has now become pink and white fire. From Szayelaporro's back, veiny, fleshy wings flutter behind him like flaps of skin, that same fiery Reiatsu gathering at the tips like a droplet. Although there is a gaping hole in Szayelaporro's chest that emanates light, and another I think can be seen on his lower abdomen in a similar position to Harribel's hollow hole, in fact Szayelaporro's hollow hole in this form, and subsequently the Hōgyoku itself, can both be found within the tip of Szayelaporro's peculiarly shaped tail, shall we say, from which leaks more of that fiery Reiatsu. And yes, I'm well aware of where the databook revealed that Szayelaporro's hollow hole actually is. Meanwhile, the lower half of Szayelaporro's body has taken on a bird-like appearance, with his legs and feet transforming entirely, while a flowing, feather-like robe splays outwards behind him majestically. This feels like a pretty clear-cut reference to Szayelaporro wanting to become the perfect being, and the association of the phoenix constantly rising from the ashes, and indeed, the in-game lore states that Szayelaporro's fusing with the Hōgyoku was a result of him continuing to try and achieve the perfect existence. The ability to continually reincarnate, which to be fair the Hōgyoku does offer. Szayelaporro's special move, La Vida Fornicarus, or You Will Fornicate Life, I mean come on, sees him floating in the sky as he impales himself in the chest with his tail in a suggestive manner, symbolising a cycle of reproduction before spawning something from the droplets within his wings. And finally we have Aaroniero, who I feel like was always going to be tough to make a form for, and so in that sense I'm glad they just went all out and turned him into a Bloodborne boss style abomination. I mean seriously, this guy is just the one reborn, and you can't convince me otherwise. But yeah, Aaroniero has become an even more monstrous eldritch creation. Supposedly to acquire this form, Aaroniero has devoured everything in his search for power, so maybe he accidentally devoured and then fused with the Hōgyoku. Either way, this is another cool design. Aaroniero looks like a makeshift being, a mess of fractured, splintered body parts and pieces. Here, he's actually taken on a more humanoid design, but his torso and limbs are stitched together by power seemingly at random. His two heads are nestled within the confines of a giant, frilled flesh collar, a reference to his Espada uniform, and they sit upon a splash of dark purple Reiatsu, mimicking the liquid within his tank. The bottom half of Aaroniero is now hidden within a skirt made up of bulbous purple tentacles, a reference to his Resurrección Glottonoria, while his Zanpakuto's gaping maw is even more prevalent now, having been completely unleashed, with a tongue of Reiatsu whipping about from within. Interestingly, the Hōgyoku can be found in Aaroniero's thigh, which feels a bit random, within a hole again full of light. Now, is this where Aaroniero's hollow hole actually is? I don't remember if it's ever been officially confirmed either way. It's impossible to say as well, since as far as we're concerned, the regular version of Aaroniero doesn't have a humanoid body at all beneath his clothes. In a cool touch, Aaroniero's frail, withered body is being held up by the tentacles, and his legs appear scrawny and cobbled together, as evidenced by the fact that he has hands for feet. With his special move Glottonoria Fuerte, or Strong Gluttony, Aaroniero spills his Reiatsu all over the floor before sending a tidal wave of power rushing over the battlefield. And so that's all of the Espada's Beyond Resurrección forms from Bleach Brave Souls. I have to say that for the most part, I really like these forms, and like I said earlier, I've been meaning to dedicate a video to them for, well, some time now. I can't believe that Ulquiorra was released for the game's 3rd anniversary, and we're now coming up on the 10th. That's kind of terrifying. But they are a little over-designed in some places, but in others I think they work really, really well, as actual evolutions of what came before, and I definitely really like more of them than not. And speaking of which, I promised you a ranking, and so we're going to end this video with my ranking of the Beyond Resurrección forms based on their designs. But yeah, that's it for the video, guys. As always, I really do hope you enjoyed it. Let me know down in the comments below what you think of the Beyond Resurrección designs for the Espada. I think it's a pretty cool alternate universe idea, and like this and Beyond Bankai afterwards, I'd love to see Bleach Brave Souls tackle something like this again in the future. Beyond Fullbring or Beyond Volstendish, I know those characters aren't as inherently popular as the Shinigami or the Ranka, but I'd still love to see them flexing their design chops. And of course, Kubo himself had a big hand and oversaw many of these designs, so his influence can be felt on them as well, which is a really cool touch. But yeah, let me know down in the comments below which is your favourite of these designs, and which is your least favourite as well. I'd love to know. Thank you so very much for watching, guys. I hope you took something of value away from this video today. I really hope I was able to sort the audio out. This is my first time using this mic properly outside of a few audio tests, so I guess we'll see on the other side of this thing. Make sure to check out my second channel, Mr. Tomo Talks Games, if you haven't done already. Once again, a massive thank you for helping us reach 10,000 subs before the end of January. I really do appreciate that so very much. Subscribe to this channel too, if you haven't done already, to push us towards 300,000 subs. And as always, I want to end the video by saying a massive thank you and giving a huge shout out to my wonderful supporters over on Patreon, without who I simply wouldn't be able to keep doing this. If you like what I do here on YouTube and you want to take the support for me another step further, thank you very much. By supporting me at the $1 a month tier, you can get your name in the credits of every single video, just like everyone here has. And at the $2 tier or higher, you can enjoy all of my videos absolutely free of baked-in YouTube ads. Alright everyone, once again, thanks so very much for watching. Until next time, I'll catch you later, and I'll see you then.